Hello, my name is Carly Weisen and my net ID is CEW89.
And I'm Carly Lawrence, and my net ID is CWL62.
And today we're going to discuss the impact of stress in adolescence. So, introduction and overview of topic. The issue. The main three things that we're going to be targeting today is one, stress and the negative impact it has on adolescents. And we'd like to point out that although this stress is definitely an issue that affects everyone, we've targeted most of our research to college students, specifically females. And three, we want to discuss healthy ways to counteract stress. So diving more into the initial issue, which is stress and the negative impact it has, basically we've discovered that, and it's clear that stress causes negative behaviors, and due to stress, people generally respond differently. And one key way that people respond is through bad habits and coping mechanisms, specifically with eating habits. And that can be different ranges of eating habits, such as anorexia and bulimia, as well as binge eating and eating a lot and in mass amounts. Just general drastic changes in eating habits. And one thing that we discovered through our research was this self-fulfilling prophecy with this freshman 15 phenomenon. Being that Carly and I are both freshmen, we definitely were aware of the freshman 15 and the stigma surrounded by it, that most freshman students, due to the fact that they're in a new eating environment, gain 15 pounds. And what we found is that actually this holds true only due to the fact that it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So students often hear this freshman 15, are stressed and nervous about gaining this 15 pounds, and due to that stress and nervousness surrounded by the fear of gaining it, they actually exhibit bad behavior such as binge eating, and then therefore they do gain it. So we're diving more into research on ways to cope that and how students and adolescents counteract stress.
So now we're going to talk more about the science perspective of what stress actually does to the body. So when the body feels stress, we kind of tend to think of it as just kind of like this psychological issue of panic, but it actually has a physical implication in the body. So the brain actually produces a hormone called corticosteroids, which sets off the sympathetic nervous system, which is actually like this flight or fight response. So it prepares the body in panic. So it'll do things like increases blood flow, dilates the pupils, and just gets the body prepared to fight. And so even if you're stressed about a test or a bear is in the room, it's going to have the same effect. So this sympathetic nervous system response also triggers another hormone called glucocorticoids, which sensitizes the hypothalamus, which is in charge of the pleasure centers in the brain. And what it does is it makes pleasurable acts even more pleasurable by increasing the dopamine response. And so this is why, as Carly was saying before, people are more likely to binge eat, because when you eat something sugary or sweet, it sensitizes this pleasure response, and you feel better after you eat something sugary. So you're going to continue in this act because you think that it's making you feel good, when in fact it's almost an addiction like drugs or anything else that's just bad in mass quantities. It also could be like turns to like binge drinking or anything else like that, and it creates this natural high in the body. And also stress has the ability to weaken the immune system, which for college students like us is the worst thing in the world, to be sick when you have a prelim.
Yep. Next, we're going to dive into the empirical basis of our issue, more specifically into three specific studies that have been done in regards to stress and eating. And they surveyed people who generally exercise a lot and assessed how their stress levels were related to that exercise. And what they found was that exercise releases endorphins in the brain, and those endorphins has the same effect as antidepressants. So what this study can have for further implications is that exercise, although we're told to do it always, it generally scientifically and biologically has such a positive effect that it can be used as a coping mechanism instead of turning to drugs, and instead of turning to antidepressants, instead of turning to alcohol, and also in our situation, instead of turning to binge eating or not eating at all and starvation. Exercise is definitely a key way to positively react.
And another study that was done called stress-induced eating is mediated through endogenous opiates. Was they took mice and they pinched their tails, and in response they found that these mice would start binge eating, like as we were talking about, people kind of have this coping mechanism of, and they really wanted to find a way to try to stop these mice from mass eating. So they injected them with naloxone, which is a type of drug that blocks the opioid receptors in the brain, which is the same thing that you would give to a person that was overdosing on drugs, because it is the same kind of effect that when you're constantly eating and feeling that kind of addiction that you want to stop it. So they did in fact find that the mice that were given the naloxone reduced their eating. So this kind of has an impact on what this could mean for humans, if that we could treat obesity and such by doing this, but at the same time there are healthier ways to go about counteracting stress. Maybe not the best idea to continually drug people. So another study that was done on the opposite end of the spectrum is that we talked a lot about binge eating, but also stress can also lead to things like anorexia, and they actually found that anorexics reduced their anxiety levels by starving themselves, because there was increased levels of tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin. So that's also pretty interesting.
Next, we're going to dive into gaps in current knowledge. And one main thing that we found was this whole aspect, especially dealing with millennials and adolescents, the whole social media aspect. And you know, with social media these days, females, specifically college students, are really hung up on maintaining and attaining that perfect body, despite the fact that sometimes things are clearly photoshopped and it's just not genuinely healthy to have the body that they so desire. So we found that a gap in the current knowledge is, from a marketing standpoint and a business standpoint, how do we prevent teens and anyone in general from viewing these ads and looking at them as heroes or as desirable, and B, how do we instead instill positive thoughts and instill realistic goals for healthiness without it seeming gimmicky and without it seeming, not right. Another way is in regards to the naloxone study with the mice. How can we translate the mouse study that Carly talked about and infuse that with humans, due to the fact that she said that stress was, eating was a result of the stress induced, and naloxone was a way to combat that. How can we put that in humans? And also generally just, I think it's like a known issue, just binge eating thoughts in general, and like how can we prevent that and more healthier options to pursue that.
So now what this means going forward. So we talked to you about what stress does to the body. So now what are healthy ways that specifically college students here at Cornell can do in order to counteract it? So as Carly mentioned before, exercise is great. The naloxone study is still going on, but also another outlet is maybe talking out your problems to either a friend, even a therapist, anyone. But at the same time, as we talked about in lecture, there's the issue of co-rumination, in which people are talking to their friends almost too much about their problems, so then the friends end up subconsciously taking on their issues. So you do have to be wary of that, but at the same time, it's always good to air out your feelings. And also there are different outlets like yoga and meditation, and just kind of being with yourself and just talking yourself down. Self-regulation in any type of stressful situation is such an important thing, because you just have to kind of put things into perspective. And even though there are all these drugs, and honestly, it's just about going back to basics.
Yeah, so just to add on and to conclude, we really found this study very interesting and informative, because although it is like common knowledge that binge eating and anorexia is bad, I didn't really understand the science behind it and how like biologically and mentally, like it can really affect you and how serious this issue is. So as the other Carly mentioned, all these are great ways and can be further and are further implications from things we found, and that you can avoid stress, but what you can do is learn how to deal with it in the right and proper way. And these are definitely some healthy suggestions.
And,
Yeah.
and especially during finals, maybe just like taking a run around BB Lake is the answer instead of going to Nasties.
Yep. Okay. Thank you so much for
Thank
listening,
you.
and I hope you have a great summer.